we have an awareness of tradition in Wales. Indeed, a friend of mine, who is now a young Norbertine, had been teaching some Welsh to the incoming Archbishop of Cardiff when he was still down in Westminster, and he had insisted towards the end of the little course he gave him, "Now, my lord, be aware, Wales is very traditional." And tradition is something which, in a sense, keeps us safe because we don't lose our moorings. When an awareness of our past goes, our future goes with it. And we live in a reckless present. And therefore, with respect, we look back. When preaching a couple of years ago at the funeral of Mayam, the theme was precisely this element of grace handed on in the simplicity of the structure. Blachai, boxes. These places of prayer were places where heaven and earth met. In the early centuries, they were simple churches, and we know that St. David looked towards the east for the inspiration for the monastic structure which he set up. Simple cells clustered around a more dignified church. It was the llan. That llan is present in every other name in Wales. It was a life based, therefore, on nudity and simplicity, which gave permission to God to act, because man wasn't in the way with his noise and complicated clutter. And so these were the stone churches. Indeed, the name of this place, Duleek, inspires us to think of that because it is, according to tradition, the first stone church built in this land of Ireland. But the church was the place where heaven met earth. And then, as time went on, these became more elaborate. And then with the Reformation, many of the churches were maintained, and things were simplified. Heaven still met earth, but there was the absence of fullness. When it came then to the 1700s, there was the explosion, the first of the great revivals, 1732, and then in the 1760s again, and it led to, eventually, in the beginning of the 1800s, the separation of what came from there, the Methodist movement, from the mainstream established church, the Anglican Communion. And then the revivals continued, 1858, 59, and set the end then of the period before the war, which was still life as it had been, but unfortunately was to be ruined by what happened afterwards. For those who went to the war in 1914-15 usually didn't come back, but they went with the experience of having encountered God in the huge revival of 1904-05, massively converting Wales, hugely to a life of prayer, honesty and sincerity, and great beauty in the air, indeed miracles as well. Golai Egrin, the fire of Egrin, the moving lights. But the First World War, to some extent, ruined Wales. The flower of the nation was lost, and then further wreckage in the Second World War, and then the falling apart of society in modern times. But these little boxes, the simple chapels, were places where there was consolation, around the Word of God enthroned, around prayer coming from the heart, at which the minister was an expert, and around the beauty of singing, because the Welsh still instinctively go into harmony, quite often four-part harmony when they sing. something which was there already in the Middle Ages, and of which Gerald Welshman, Gerald Comprehensis, talks in his writings. But the will of God, nevertheless, is that we should have that fullness of faith that Dewi himself had, which is also there in the East, insofar as they have the sacramental life. Unfortunately, the East is no longer in communion with Rome, which wasn't the case with regard to the Celtic Church. They always were. So we need to be aware that heaven still is the same, and man essentially is not different. And what has worked will still work. That simplicity, that void, that unclutteredness, that availability which we need and against which modern society hugely militates. We need peace and quiet and places where that is preserved. With regard to the Celtic Church itself, both in Wales and in Ireland, and also in Scotland, we have that continuum. They would not know our language of active and contemplative. They were just in love with Jesus, and in that there was an openness to whatever Jesus asked. As in the Acts of the Apostles, St. Paul, in a dream or a vision, saw this man from Macedonia appearing to him and saying, "Come over and help us." So too the Spirit was free to move, and indeed in iconography Dewi is presented with a dove on his shoulder. He was a master of the word. And at the synod held at Brevi, he is known for his word. By the thousand they came to hear him, and they could not because of the crowd, and so the Lord produced the first megaphone of history. According to tradition, Dewi placed a blessed napkin under him and stood upon it, and the ground rose, and the ground is still there to be seen higher than the rest of the ground, at a place which since then is called Llandewi Brevi. The preacher, therefore, and Wales has always had a tradition of preaching. In still Protestant Wales, there is that element of fire. The word is used to the full. The body is used to the full. They know how, without microphones, to fill the church with moving words and to sway the congregation. The whole body enters into play. And when it comes then to bringing Catholicism back to by now Protestant Wales, one has to be aware of that, because if the Catholic preacher can only read a script, he's competing in vain. We need therefore to be aware that even though the tradition was incomplete, grace was not absent, and it led to a whole plethora of literature being produced, and also a massive amount of hymns. William Williams Patrick produced about 1,000 hymns, still sung to this day. Moving and powerful, talking about the experiences. They had the proviadai, they encountered directly, and that comes through. It is heart material, encounter material, feeling material. Therefore, the emotions enter into play. And even though emotions are partly human, they can be used by the Holy Spirit. Why? It's as in the liturgy, an atmosphere created opens the door of the will, because the heart is moved. And so we need the consolation of good preaching, good singing, beauty in our simplicity in church, and we need the spirit of warmth. As he died, it is reported that Dewi said to his brethren, "Cadwch y pethau bychain," keep the little things. Love cares for the little things. Beauty at the altar. Love between the brethren. And the treasure of tradition handed on. conclude, let us hear what has been handed on regarding Dewi. The Holy Father David prescribed an austere system of monastic observance, requiring every monk to toil daily at manual labour and to lead a common life. So, with unflagging zeal, they work with hand and foot. They put the yoke to their own shoulders, and in their own holy hands they bear the tools for labour in the fields. So, by their own strength, they procure every necessity for the community, while refusing possessions and detesting riches. They make no use of oxen for ploughing. Everyone is rich to himself and to his brethren. Every man is his own ox. When the field work is done, they return to the enclosure of the monastery to pass their time till evening at reading, writing, or in prayer. Then, when the signal is heard for evening prayer, everyone leaves what he is at, and in silence, without any idle conversation, they make their way to church. When, with heart and voice attuned, they have completed the psalmody, they remain on their knees until the stars appearing in the heaven bring day to its close. Yet, when all have gone, the Father remains there alone, making his own private prayer for the well-being of the Church. Shedding daily abundance of tears, offering daily his sweet-scented sacrifice of praise, aglow with an intensity of love, he consecrated with pure hands the fitting oblation of the Lord's body, and so, at the conclusion of the morning offices, attaining alone to the converse of angels. Then the whole day was spent, undaunted and untired, in teaching, praying, on his knees, caring for the brethren, and for orphans and children and widows, and everyone in need, for the weak and the sick, for travellers, and in feeding many. The rest of this stern way of life would be profitable to imitate, but the shortness of this account forbids our entering upon it. But in every way his life was ordered in imitation of the monks of Egypt. Amen.